What's up? Dan Blewett here, and I've got another book review. This one is called The Only Rule Is It Has to Work. So I don't have a physical copy here, so I'm just going to point to this graphic that I'm going to put up here. Book graphic. Book graphic. I read this on Kindle, and I actually read it back in 2016 because the antagonist in the story was actually my locker mate. So this book is really interesting. It's by Ben Lindbergh and Sam Miller. And it basically details these two baseball analytics stat guys, Ben and Sam. They got to take kind of control over this really low-level independent team called the Sonoma Stompers, based out of Sonoma, wine country, California. And their manager was a player coach, my former teammate, Phelan Lentini. So when I was playing for the Long Island Ducks in 2016, I was sitting right next to Phelan. He's a really interesting kind of West Coast vibe. He's a phenomenal base stealer, phenomenal baseball player in general. I mean, he played a long time. I think he's still playing. Just one of those guys that just, him and baseball just are in harmony. They love each other. I think he's still like 500 bases in the minor leagues. But anyway, so I was reading this book because, it was an interesting premise that these two stats guys got to take control of a team and kind of play the team out like a fantasy baseball team. They got to try out some new stuff, using a closer in a non-traditional way, doing different things with lineups, just manipulating things like they might their own fantasy team, in accordance with some of the new stats things and analytics things and sabermetrics things that were kind of floating around as interesting thoughts, like different ways to reorder the lineup and construct your team and ways to analyze players and find good talent, and especially under the radar talent, stuff like that. So they did all this stuff, and what ended up happening was they butted heads a lot with my buddy Phelan, who is more of like a classic old school baseball guy. So I actually had a lot of fun reading passages out to him. I was like reading it aloud sometimes in the clubhouse, passages that weren't super friendly to him because it was like getting him really mad and flustered, and I thought it was really funny. But it was interesting for me because I initially wanted to take Phelan's side. This is my teammate. He's a really nice guy. He's a really good ball player, really knows the game. And I felt like some of the book was unfair to him. But at the same time, he does have sort of an old school mindset, and some of the thought processes by the two analytics guys were sound and smart and also kind of like hypotheses and not necessarily like completely tested, but they need to be tested, right? So there was this butting heads because it was sort of new school versus old school and untested versus tried and true. Not to say that it was always the best way to do it, but that was a dynamic in the book, and that's kind of why Phelan was made out to be sort of the antagonist, sort of the villain of the book, because there just was conflict. And so as I read the book, I always try to be objective, and even though I want to take my buddy's side, Phelan, I saw the merit in both dynamics. So the stats guys, they were definitely making a lot of intelligent moves that were really thought-provoking. And Phelan at times had some good points about stuff that he felt like they didn't understand because they weren't players. So it was a really interesting book about the gap between the front office and the analysts and guys who are down the dugout sliding in the dirt. So when I finished the book, I was going to leave a review, and I didn't. I really liked it. It's really well written. I thought the story was interesting, and it was really thought-provoking in a good way. Because, again, we do need to have our ideas challenged. More ideas than ever in baseball are being challenged. And this book is a really thought-provoking way to do that. So the more distance I got from it after I read it, and I was still, in the locker room with Phelan, the more I didn't really pick a side. I just felt like I enjoyed kind of the back and forth. I feel like it was unfortunate that Phelan was vilified a little bit, but at the same time, I understood the struggle from both sides. It was just baseball has been going through some growing pains, conflict between players and analysts who say, you should play the game this way. They're like, don't tell me how to play it. I've been playing it my whole life, that kind of thing. And that was kind of the way the book went. But I think the biggest value that the book provides is that it gives you, again, a reason to have your common notions challenged. Like, why not use the closer in this role? Why not structure the lineup this way? Why not find players who are like this rather than traditionally having them, fit this mold when we're recruiting and scouting? So I think for any coach who really likes playing the numbers, who really likes some of the geekier side of baseball, who wants to be current with baseball. I think it's a really thought-provoking read and definitely worth your time. It's a book that I would definitely give 5 stars to. I think it's really interesting and really well written. And even though I had the sort of like my teammate here on one side and the authors on the other, it didn't like change the fact that it's a really worthwhile book to read, and I think important just for any coach, player who's just trying to understand the way baseball is changing. All right, so I would say definitely give it a check it out. Here's the graphic somewhere next to me. Again, I read it on Kindle, but I think it's available in all different hard copy Kindle and probably audiobook too. I don't know. But check it out. Links are below in the description. Get your own copy and see what you think.